Well, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Savant. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Phoenix, Arizona on KXXT Family Values Radio. I also want to welcome our online audience on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I want to give a big shout out to Beyond Fear to Freedom, one of the best Christ-centered fellowships that provide a safe and loving community for women in recovery. Just check out their site at beyondfeartofreedom.org. And hey, if you want to write the Savant, go right ahead. My email is steve@180uturn.com. That's steve at 180YOUTURN. I'm happy to answer all your questions. Keep those theological questions away from me. I don't want to deal with it. All right. Well, today we're talking with Raygen Mitchell. All this week, outstanding testimony, and you're going to be blessed as I am. But as you all know, our format, we got to talk about the bad boy days first. It's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 3 days from hell, and you just got to hear it because the drama of people's conversions are that great. Welcome to the show, Reagan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a blessed time to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. We just started. Remember, we did about 6 or 7 gals in a row. Last week, we had our first guy. It was great. I was like, I thought I was living in the estrogen zone, you know?
Well, I think everybody probably really enjoyed the transformation stories of the women. They're always the hardest, it seems to me, to hear a woman change and just go from it always seems like they get, I don't know about me, but it always feels like a woman, it's just their life seems like they get taken advantage of more than I ever could.
I think you're totally there on that. You know, listen, I want to bring up an issue that Reagan's testimony is going to bring right away, and that is, in the 60s, we basically untied ourselves from the moorings of morality. We basically went adrift. And we're the first generation, the boomers, we're the first generation to come into serious drugs, serious alcoholism, serious sex, STDs, abortion. I mean, we actually brought in everything we're suffering today is my generation. And, you know, Tom Brokaw wrote that great book, you know, The Greatest Generation Ever, speaking about the World War II Korean guys. Right. I'd love to write a book called The Worst Generation Ever. We completely contaminated and screwed up our society. And people say, Steve, you're blaming your generation. I guess I am. There it is.
Yeah, I am. I feel like, what was it, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll of the 60s, it just seems like it just kind of pervasively got into society. Free love, free thinking, free sex, all of that. And it just carried on.
And it turned out not to be free.
No, it wasn't. It's never free.
Now, the reason I bring this up, you say, Steve, why are you bringing this up? Because Reagan's father is like my generation, and we introduce it. Now we're running into second generations of people that are now, like dope is a normal thing in the home. Yeah. Nobody's sitting there, you know, sneaking around anymore. So now we're into our second generation, another populace. Now we're talking about Gen X and Y guys that are sitting there with serious problems, and their parents were all good with them doing whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah, my dad definitely, I would say, like, you know, it was one of those things where he would try and hide it as best he thought he could, but it was one of those things where he was a full-blown drug addict most of my life, all of my life. So it was always around. I was always just exposed to it. It was just a normal thing. Just one of those things where my dad would have stolen goods in his, like, in my mom and dad's closet all the time. My dad was a thief, and so like he would have bags of jewelry that he had stolen just in the closet, and you know, it's one of those things where so it was always around, just a normal, or seemed to be like a normal thing, but I knew it was an abnormal thing because no one else's family lived like that. But so it was just a really unusual upbringing. You know how whenever, like the thing that always I found out later was a weird thing for me was, you know, dads will be like, hey, you know, stand up straight, you know, don't forget to brush your teeth. And so my dad would impart things like, never talk to the cops. Doesn't matter if your house is on fire, you don't call the cops. Never rat on a friend. You know, your word is your bond. So I got these prison type of these things that you would learn in prison or on a yard from the time I was a kid. And so it was just an unusual time.
I mean, you know, we think about foreign kids being with ISIS and being trained from their ground up as children to have their basic belief systems and so forth. And now in America, we're learning all the inside issues that should be relegated to only prisoners. And now our fathers who did prison, your dad did time, my dad did time, we're learning all this stuff from the old man. Hey, what happened here, you know? Yeah. Okay, and when your dad is into drugs, and as we used to say back in the 60s, the guy would say, well, what do you do? Well, I do speed. Well, I do Valium. I do weed. Well, that's sissy drugs to most people, right? That's sissy drugs.
Yeah.
So when your dad came, this guy's doing meth and he's shooting heroin.
Yeah, so my dad, again, like Alex said, my dad was always a more guy. Whatever it was, if one was good, two was better. And whatever you had, great. Let's do some of that. Let's do all of whatever it is you have. But I believe that like his drugs of choice were heroin, and back then they didn't really call it meth. Back then it was speed or crank or whatever. And so those were his drugs of choice. Speed up, go down. Speed up, go down. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned very quickly as a musician, Valium is not my friend. I'm already a happy person. I don't need to be brought down. So, okay. When you think about it, though, your dad not only participated in the drug culture in a major way, and you just told me not only is this guy major, this guy's up in a whole league by himself. These guys are always up in their game all the time.
Right.
But he's in and out of jail and prison at the same time.
Yeah, so most of my life in my young adult, or before the age of 6, I had probably seen the inside of every medium and max visitation room, going to Oklahoma State Penitentiary, which they called the Walls. It's been around since the 30s. It's arcane. Like, I just remember as a small child going to visit my dad there, because he was there for about 18 years of my life. And I just remember going and visiting and thinking to myself, this place smells like death. It was just dark. Everything was concrete. You had to go through like 3 locked doors just to get to the visitation room. And it was just a really depressing place. It just smelled stale and musky. No one seemed happy, not even, there was no joy. And it was just I got used to every other Saturday getting a Ziploc bag with a pack of cigarettes, $4 in quarters, one book of matches, taking that everywhere. My mom would lug me around to go see my dad, and it just was just an unusual time. And then coming back home, Monday, and going back to school with all these kids and trying to do everything I could to make sure that nobody knew that A, my dad was locked up, and B, that I was like nothing like him. So I was always trying to be like this, always trying to be something that I thought I wasn't, and always trying to run from something that I thought I was. And that was just pervasive through the rest of my life.
Yeah, I tell you what, we talk about identification in the Lord many times, and this is one of those ID issues where, am I going to go the same route as my dad? Unfortunately, some of my brothers did.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry about that. But when you think about going to visitation on this side as a child, not their side, the prison side, but on this side as a child, it can be really rough, and you don't know what's going on. And yes, the last thing you want to do is go back to school and people find out, hey, your dad's shooting heroin and he's sitting in the can.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to understand that.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to appreciate that. And most fathers who have dateable daughters, I've already been off their list.
Yeah, always was an issue of making sure that no one knew that my father was who he was, that he was involved in, being locked up and was a drug addict and was involved in crime. It's not really, like you said, on the top 10 things you're looking for someone to date your daughter.
Right.
Those don't even rank in the top 100. Yeah.
Now, here's a statement that you shot me, and this is why I think it's important, because I can't believe that there are hundreds and thousands of people that feel this way. You said, if you knew the real me, you wouldn't like me or love me.
Yeah, powerful statement that I basically was a driving fundamental core belief, of course a wrong core belief, but a driving fundamental core belief in my life was, if I let you get to know the real me, then you won't love me, because why would you? Because of all of, my father's a drug addict. I was raised around people that, my mom, beautiful woman. I don't know how, I think I've always felt like my dad tricked my mom a long time ago, because my mom was a school teacher, worked really hard. She never did drugs a day in her life. My dad met her. I think my mom actually thought my dad had a real job for the first year they were married, until it came time to do their taxes, and my dad finally was like, I don't even have a job. But my mom worked so tirelessly, kind of got caught up with my dad, and then I felt like she just kind of got trapped in this marriage. And so my just always wondered, my mom, everyone saw my mom working really hard, nobody really knew about my dad, and I was always like, if they find out about my dad, they're going to find out about me, and I am his son, you are your father's son. And so I would always live this belief system, if you know the real me, you won't love me.
And by the way, the beauty of once you become a Christian is you can say the statement like father, like son.
Yes.
I mean, I'm there net.
Absolutely.
Now, you started out in Oklahoma City, right? I mean, your family, right?
So I was born in Muskogee, Oklahoma, which is if you listen to country music, everybody knows, they've heard of Muskogee from Merle Haggard. It's our claim to fame. But a small town outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, was raised there until I was about 11, and then we moved to Oklahoma City, and that's where I grew up the rest of my life.
Okay, and so when I'm thinking about growing up there, and this is middle America. You're
Small town.
About as straight up as you can get. Country music's like ran in the ranks. Nobody's doing Metallica, probably at that time. I don't know, maybe so.
No, yeah, I'd start to say, nobody's listening to MTV, nobody's doing Metallica. It's Conway Twitty.
Okay, and just as I've said before, and I don't want to get bad email here, it's not my first ranked musical stuff that I listen to. Okay, fine. I want to think about when you're listening to this story, you're saying, like, God, this, Reagan was behind the 8 ball almost from the get-go. And when they call it PTSD, but I like to call it parental trauma, right? I want to introduce parental. I don't want to talk about post-traumatic syndrome. I want to talk about parental trauma that added this state that we're in. So I want to encourage you. If you say, Steve, I have a bad upbringing, my child has been bad, the next couple days here, it's going to open you up, and you might find relief in knowing, not number one, that somebody's went through this themselves, and number two, that you could find solace in the Lord if you go the way Reagan did. We'll be right back after this break.
Awesome.
You know the road to recovery can be difficult, but you don't have to travel it alone. Every Friday night, like-minded women gather together to share a meal and their stories, how they broke the destructive cycles in their lives by the power of God and moved on to a new life in Christ.
Beyond Fear to
For more
Freedom.
information about Friday night,
Beyond Fear to Freedom.
I wrote the commercial.
Or you don't live in the Phoenix area, you can stay connected by joining BFF's Subscribe Tribe, where you receive their weekly study guide, so you can track with them online. Just sign up today on BFF's website at beyondfeartofreedom.org. And don't forget to listen to BFF's weekly video podcast with Debbie G and Sheridan. Their own life experiences and their biblical influence will overhaul your thinking, your identity, and your future. They'll keep you encouraged with some great insight and biblical truth. Just friend them on Facebook or go out to their website at beyondfeartofreedom.org. BFF, where you might just discover the best friend forever.
Well, welcome back. We're with Raygen Mitchell. We're talking about his story, his testimony, and I have to say, when I'm talking to the second generation of families that dope is the regular part of their family life. I could see myself growing up, and my father, all my father and a lot of his brothers and men in my family, they're all alcoholics, functioning. They always went to work. They always were able to handle it.
Right.
But they were drinkers, and I mean, those things influenced them. And women in my family they were second-class citizens all day long.
Right.
In your family, when this is going on, finally your dad gets a big, long stint, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
This is where it kind of went from, petty arrest, jail, a little bit of prison, a little bit back and forth, but now 18 years down.
Yeah, the funny story that my dad used to like to tell, which to give you an idea of how twisted or how my dad, looking back on events that were traumatic in my life, I woke my dad up one night, this is 9 or 10, and I told him that there were ninjas attacking the house. I was like, there's ninjas, and my dad, he's like, you're weird, crazy, go to bed. And I was like, no, there's literally ninjas storming the house. And then the police kicked in the back door, flooded in the house, and they were wearing those black turtle suits, we like to call them. And so that's why I thought they were ninjas. So my dad got arrested.
Oh, wait, excuse me, just for a second. How old were you when this went down?
About 9.
About 9. Well, that's ninja.
Yeah, so I thought it was a ninja. So they bring me in, they bring us all into the living room, put us all in the living room. There's cops just tearing up the house. It's just a traumatic experience. And my dad gets arrested, gets charged with a bunch of crimes. He gets 3 33-year sentences all running together, and ends up doing 18 flat on it. And so he goes away about the time I was 10, and then we moved.
Now, this is another place where I have a similar experience where they came to get my dad after the armed robbery and all this, and they came into our little apartment and ransacked the place looking for him, and my dad tried to, book it out the screen door and down the drain pipe. Very athletic. Yeah. Things like that stick in your head. You don't forget things like this, right? Right. And you say, if you're listening to our show, you go, "Hey, Steve, you and Reagan, what's your problem?" Well, we were born in a very let's say dark family, right? Would you not say?
Yeah, you get stuck in this cycle of sin and immorality, and it just becomes like without you even knowing it, it starts to seep into your soul, right? Like, again, you go back to the place where you think, this is who I am, even though it's not who you are, you're a child, but because of the reflection of your father, you think, man, maybe I am like this, or am I going to be like this, or is my destiny to grow up and be just like this? And so it just taints everything that you do. So everything that you do is through a lens of either trying harder to not be like that, or every time something does happen, like anytime you do something wrong, you immediately go to, well, am I becoming like my dad? And so it just causes you to get into the hamster wheel and just run faster and run faster.
Yeah, the problem, when you start orbiting around people, and in this case our dads, we start orbiting around and we're picking up characteristics of their personality that we want to be endearing to our fathers, so whether we like it or not, we're picking them up. And now they're being introduced and becoming part and parcel of who we are, which again is not our true identity. In fact, actually, when you think about it, the most of my unbelieving days were just like that, and I'm sure you could say the same thing. I had no idea who I was. I actually lost my ID, and I used to listen to the Who sing "Who Are You?" their song, and I used to go, I have no idea. Now, when he's in and out of jail, 18 years now, are you still visiting him during this time?
So once we moved to Oklahoma City, actually, he stopped. He told us not to come visit him anymore because it was too hard for him. And
well, why was it too hard for him?
Because every time we would come to visit, he would always say it brought out like a tender side of him, or made him feel more. And so while he was locked up, he couldn't really be that. Like there's no room when you're incarcerated for a long, long time, especially in like a medium max. There's really no room for like any soft edges, right? So he felt like every time we were around, it made it harder for him to be the person he needed to be to make it through prison. And so he was just like, look, I'll write to you guys, but I just don't want you coming. It's too hard for me when you guys come. And to be honest with you, it was really hard on my mom. And it was just really, every time we went, it just stirred me up and got me all confused and got me all weird. And so it actually was just better for us just to not go visit anymore.
Well, how long did that go on with no visitation?
For 13, 14 years.
So you're only communicating with a letter or a postcard?
Or a phone call, like on holidays. He'd call, we'd go over to my grandmother's house, because my mom still spent time with my father's family. And so we'd go to my grandmother's house and he'd call, the 20-minute phone call, and you'd get to talk to him for a second, and he'd tell you that he loved you, and, and wouldn't know anything about you, or I would know anything about him, but he'd tell me he loved me and he was my dad. And so it was this really disassociative kind of thing where I was like, I have a dad, I really don't know him because he's been incarcerated most of my life, and when he was around, he was disengaged because he would be coming down, or because the only time he would come back around was he would leave, be gone for 3 weeks. We'd find, I'd hear rumors that he was out running around with some girlfriend, and then he'd basically run out of drugs and run out of money and come home and crash to fuel back up to go out again.
Well, I'm thinking about my hundreds of trips through 4th Avenue here in Phoenix. And you have to go through everybody waiting for visitation to get to the blocks.
Oh, nice.
So it's brutal when you have a kid crying because he can't see his parents, but his parent did something inside that disqualified him from having visitation. His behavior was bad, right? And they're trying to talk to the officer, and everybody's getting mad at the officer, and the officer's just doing his job.
Right.
You can't let him in.
Screaming and yelling, yeah.
Visitation is a horrible place to go through. Every time I've gone through it, it's like reliving some of my own stuff. And it's not that the Lord hasn't fixed me. He's fixed me in these regards. But you cannot walk through things like that and not have empathy. You can't. Right. If you have the Lord, there's things in you that really awaken you to have sympathy and empathy for other people. Now, during this time, you're in high school.
Yeah, so what's crazy is my dad goes to prison, and my mom really did everything she could to just really try and create an environment for me to do well and succeed, really worked hard. And like I said, I got in the hamster wheel, ran really fast. I thought if I just was the best student and did everything that all these other normal people did, then I could be normal. So I was always felt like I was a not normal person trying really hard to wear a normal jacket. And if I wasn't careful, like the jacket might be too tight or whatever, so I had to make sure. So I was always walking on eggshells all my life. Thought I would say, because at any moment I thought here, like any moment the other shoe's going to drop. So I was a straight A student, worked really hard. I was in honors classes. I was a kind of a nerdy kid. I used to always think that I was really cooler than I probably was. I was that kid, but I really wasn't. I was just a nerdy kid. And so I just really tried really, really hard to do everything I could to not be like my dad. But the problem is being like my dad and not being like him was always on my mind. So instead of being focused on what I wanted to be, I was focused on what I didn't want to be. And so whenever things did fall apart later, it was easy because I already had the blueprint in my head because I've been thinking about it all my life.
How much of that then, I'm just asking you now, Reagan, how much of that is this self-criticism and programming that nobody's there to interrupt you, nobody's there to tell you, no, that's not who you are. So you programmed yourself. There's a lot of self-indictment here.
Oh, absolutely.
So how much of that just proved to be your own programming into your life as well?
Yeah, so had every opportunity to go a different direction. But because I had this belief system from a long time ago, just embedded in my life, every time anything happened remotely that reinforced it, my self-criticism, self-talk, internal self-talk jumped on it. So if I would do something wrong, I was just like my dad, there you're going to be just like your dad. And I would just keep hammering myself with it. And so every time I fell short, create these high expectations and then fall short. It's one of those things where I have 100 things that I want to check off a list. I do 99, but I don't do 100. I'm a failure. And so the self-talk, the self-criticism, always beating myself up, it just really led me to a place, like I said, where I felt like an imposter. I had that imposter syndrome where I had a good life. I was doing the right things, but I felt like I was just tricking everyone because at any moment the real me was going to show up and I was going to be a bad person and start making bad choices.
Do you think that's are children from this kind of scenario? Are we just ticking time bombs waiting to go off?
I feel like without especially like me, like I didn't know the Lord. In fact, if you asked me about Christ, I would laugh or tell you that people, like I thought of like the people that had the snakes in their hands, and I would immediately gravitate to like Jim Bakker and people that had just fallen really big. And so without having a bedrock for your life, you're just adrift in an ocean in a dinghy, a small little boat just getting tossed around. And so you have all this trauma unresolved and nowhere to resolve it.
Most of my time in men's prisons has proven one thing, that the Father in heaven that we talk about is getting personified by our own earthly father.
Yes.
They're just pinning it all on God. And, it's not his fault any of this has happened. So I just say, when we're being programmed like this, and I just feel a kinship here with Reagan. I got the same story in the backup, and I'm not smart like he was, though. I just barely got out of high school. But I just want to say, if you're going through this yourself, and maybe you're even a kid, you're listening, your mom's got the radio on, you have a whole destiny that has nothing to do with the behavior of your parents.
Amen.
If you went through divorce, this has nothing to do with you. Well, it does, but you know what I mean. I don't want you to become committed and obligated to your earthly parents' flaws and characteristics that are just hurtful and harmful and could deflect and make a detour in your life for what God really wants. Now, when you talk about this, you're getting where you're dating, you're checking out women. Hey, you might even this gal, right?
Absolutely. I was trying to find everything that I didn't think I had when I was younger.
And I must say, when you're 18, women is the top of the list.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, listen, I want you to go and check out the BFF meeting on Friday night if you're not doing anything at 5:30 to 6:15. Food and fellowship. Child care is provided. That's great. And you can hop out to their site to get the address and all the times and everything I'm talking about. Just hop out there to beyondfeartofreedom.org. All that information on what they do is on there. And remember, I'm Steve Savant. And until next time, no one's outside the reach of God.
Amen.
No, not one.